Here we are again, folks. It's been such a pleasure. This isn't a gameplay video, but I've been getting requests from people. Wamore, how do you set up Dxtory? Or, Ramore, how do you record your games? Well, simply put, depending on what game it is, I'll either use straight Dxtory or a combination of Dxtory and XSplit. The latter is typically used when I want to broadcast. So let's go over the straight Dxtory configuration right now. This is good if you're just starting out and you want to be able to record demos of, let's say, a competitive match, if you're pubbing, lobbying, or if you're like my friend Heidi, who is obsessed with Super Hexagon. So let's just drop right into Dxtory. This is most likely what you're going to see when you start Dxtory for the first time. You're going to have this bit of target information. And this, for the most part, you can ignore somewhat. It's only useful if you have an issue and people actually ask what the target information wants. Next up is your FPS counter configuration. I pretty much just leave this default. This will put a little ticker up in the upper left-hand corner that will tell you your FPS, not only your video FPS, but your record FPS. Yes, they're 2 different frames per second because you have your FPS when you're gaming. That's typically around 60. Then you have your recording FPS, which is the frames per second that Dxtory is getting and sending to, whether that's a direct file output or a direct show output. I'll explain the difference between those two in a little bit. Next, you have your folder tab. This needs to be set up when you install Dxtory, because if this is not set up, Dxtory will have no clue where to put your video. It is extremely important you do this. So, simply to add a folder, click this little folder with a green plus, browse for folder, and for now, I'm just going to do test on my desktop as a separate folder. You will notice that I do have a folder leading to an external hard drive, or a separate hard drive, rather. I'm just going to tweak that so my mouse doesn't keep flickering, because that's really annoying. That's typically where my videos go. If both of these are checked as they are now, a video will go into both locations. Bear in mind, though, that the more locations you have checked at once, the more processor and the more resources that this is going to use. This little guy over here that looks like a record button, it actually isn't. It's a little benchmark. So we can click it, and we can give it a right size. Let's say for kicks, I don't know, 1024 megabytes. It'll run through writing a gigabyte of data to your hard drive and give you a general benchmark of what that does. And that was a poor example because typically you'll have a larger video to deal with. But right now that's giving me 16 megabytes a second. I'll rerun that a little later. You'll notice before it was 200 some odd megabytes a second or whatever it was. Down here at the bottom, you can set your folder for if you want to take screenshots. I typically disable this because I usually use the in-game screenshot system or just Windows print screen. Sometimes this is nice if the game in question does not support in-game screenshots. Although I would think most games nowadays do support in-game screenshots, which is a glorious thing. Speaking of disabling that, we're on to the keyboard tab. By default with Dxtory, your start-stop movie capture is usually F12. As you notice, I have mine set to print screen for the fact that when I'm in a game like TF2, if I hit F12, every time I start or stop a Dxtory capture, it would take a community screenshot, and that would get really annoying. It got really annoying really quick. Because for a while, I completely forgot what the Steam community screenshot sound was like, and then I realized, oh, that's why I have all these screenshots in my screenshot folder. And that's why I was low on storage space. This is where we get into the video settings and the output with the file output or the direct show output. So let's start over here on the left, up top. My settings are as follows. Dxtory video codec. The guys who make Dxtory recently came out with the packbit codec. Sadly, this codec is not a 64-bit compatible codec. It is only a 32-bit codec. Hopefully they will come out with a 64-bit version, but last check, it's only a 32-bit codec. So, I've been using the Dxtory video codec. It's a good codec, although it does tend to create large files. It is a lossless codec. I click this little marker pen button thing, and in the Dxtory video codec window, I've got YUV24 high quality checked. There's not really much difference between true quality and high quality, so I just go with high quality. I don't see any reason to go true quality. And then, of course, compress. It will, it makes a slight difference in the size of the video, but not by much. The real compression will happen after you get your AVI from Dxtory and you plop it into Vegas. I recommend using Vegas if you're going to edit stuff from Dxtory, because Vegas actually supports the way Dxtory records. And I'll explain that a little bit more once we get through the video settings. Don't touch the clipping or cropping. Frame rate set to 60. Output. I usually toggle between file output or direct show. Direct show is useful, especially if you want to send your video to something like XSplit, Ustream Broadcaster, Open Broadcaster, the Flash video encoder, whatever the hell it's called now. That's useful if you want to do that. Bear in mind, if you use both at the same time, it could cause lag. I mean, using one of them can cause a little lag, but it's not really noticeable. Using both of them can cause lag depending on what game it is. I haven't seen much in the way of issues when I record SimCity or Team Fortress 2 using both of them. And again, I haven't done that in a while because I've been recording using XSplit. But with a huge game like Saints Row, I get some weird frame loss issues. I'm still trying to sort those out. Down below this is file format. We can select from an AVI or a raw cap. I usually use AVIs. Well, I don't usually. I always use APIs because they're just that much easier to manage. Options include mouse cursor, although with TF2 or other FPSs, I typically disable this because it seems kind of weird to have the mouse cursor just appear in the middle of the game. Synchronized video FPS, I don't usually touch that. I don't really see a need to. I really actually haven't experimented with that much at all. Who insists on harassing me? Oh. Never mind. I will deal with that after this video. Hello. People, can you, stop texting me? Of course, I record a video and people decide to harass me. That's usually how it works. So, we're on to the audio recording or the audio settings portion of Dxtory. And this is where the multi-channel, multi-track thing comes in, which I kind of briefly mentioned earlier. The reason why I like Vegas is the way Dxtory records. Each device you have set up in Dxtory, in this case I've got my USB audio codec and my USB audio codec, which I'm going to need to adjust to use my Scarlett 2i2. But for now, this was the old setup. One is, you'll notice, speakers, and the other one is speakers. One should be speakers and one should be microphone. That's just so you get the output from your game recorded. And the nice thing is, if you take the AVI and bring it into Vegas, it'll automatically see both tracks and think of them as two separate audio tracks, although they're bound to the video itself. Whereas if you were to use something like Premiere, unless this has changed, it might have. Last time I had to use Premiere, I ended up having to use Virtual Dub before I could go into Premiere, because I had to take the video file and split the audio tracks, because Premiere does not seem to want to interpret those audio tracks, which is very annoying and a little more time consuming. I typically set my audio codec to PCM, and the audio format is 44100 kilohertz, and the 16-bit stereo. I was going to say mono. Oops. You can opt to use a push-to-talk hotkey, but for me, it's kind of useless. Both of these, you want to have record sound checked together, otherwise it's not going to record sound. And your screenshot settings. I have not touched these because, like I said, I typically use the in-game facilities to do such things. And these are just more settings that I have not touched. I pretty much just leave all this extra stuff default. Or at least I think I did. And then, of course, Dxtory license, which I need to blur out, maybe. Anyways, folks, if you have any further questions, or if you want to, excuse me, well, I die from my cough. If you would like me to demonstrate how I have my Dxtory set up, post that in the comments below, and I will be sure to do that sometime soon. As always, you can find me on my Basecamp online at www.target-acquired.org. That's www.target-acquired, or www www.tagcwamori.com. That's www.tagcwamori.com. And as I was saying, this video came from a request in the Target Acquired forums, actually. And those can be found, the link to those can be found at www.target-acquired.org. That's www.target-acquired.org. Remember, Target Acquired is the game clan where everyone is welcome. And as I always say, until next time, good gaming.